All right, today's lesson is solving quadratic equations by completing the square, part 2. Sometimes the leading coefficient of the quadratic is greater than 1. To complete the square, follow these steps. We're going to divide the leading coefficient to every term. And then 2, we're going to proceed with the same process as before to complete the square. For example, complete the square of 4x squared plus 8x. So this time we have a leading coefficient that's greater than 1. So you don't just hop and divide 8 by 2 and square the result. What you're going to do is divide everything by 4 first. So we got 4x squared plus 8x. You got to make this leading coefficient 1. So you divide whatever is multiplied to x squared to every term. So you have 4x squared, divide everything by 4. 4 divides to itself once, so I get x squared. 4 divides into 8 twice, so I get x squared plus 2x. And then you go through the same procedure. I take the linear coefficient and divide it by 2. And then 2, I square the result. So 1 squared is just 1. So what I'm going to do is add 1, and that completes the square. All right, solve 4x squared plus 8x equals 21 by completing the square. With the equation, we do the same thing, except now we're going to divide everything, both left and right of the equation, by 4 first. Then you can continue to solve. So I'm going to divide everything by 4 first. 4 divides to itself once. I get x squared. 4 divides into 8 twice. So that's 2x. But now, notice that 4 won't divide into 21, so I leave it as 21 fourths. All right, now from the previous, you saw that 1 is what completes the square from the previous example. So you're going to add 1 to both sides to complete the square of this equation. And so you guess this is going to be x plus 1 squared. I got to add this fraction together. So this is 21 fourths plus 4 over 4. So this is 25 over 4. X plus 1 squared. And I take the square root to both sides. And when I do that, I'm going to get x plus 1 equals plus or minus 5 halves. And I'm going to subtract 1 to both sides. So what I'll get is x equals 5 halves minus 1. And I can express 1 as 2 over 2. 5 minus 2 is just 3. So part of your answer is going to be 3 halves. And then the other is, this could be negative 5 halves. And I'm going to subtract this by 1, which is the same as 2 over 2. Negative 5 minus 2 is negative 7. So I get negative 7 over 2. And that's it. So you get 3 halves and negative 7 halves. All right, solve 9z squared plus 48z equals 36 by completing the square. So 9 is greater than 1. So we're going to do the same thing. We're divide 9 to everything, to every term. So 9 divides to itself 1 time, so I get z squared. But notice that 9 doesn't divide into 48. So we're going to take 48 ninths and see if you can reduce it. Well, it turns out that 3 divides into both 48 and 9. So 3 divides into 48 16 times. And divides into 9 3 times. So this becomes 16/3 z. And 9 divides into 36 4 times. And now we want to complete the square. And we do the same thing. Now my coefficient is 16/3. So I take 16/3 and I got to divide it by 2. That's the same thing as multiplying by 1/2. 2 divides into 16 8 times. So I'm left with 8/3. And the second step is to square the result. So 8/3 squared gives me 64/9. And this is what I'm going to add to both sides of the equation to complete the square. So I have z squared plus 16/3 z plus 64/9. But I have to add 64/9 to 4. Or I can write this expression as a square. I'm going to put z plus 8/3 squared. And I have to add the fractions here. So I get 36 plus 64, that's 100. So I get 100/9. And what I'm going to do is take the square root to both sides. So I get z plus 8/3 equals plus or minus, well, the square root of 100 is 10, and the square root of 9 is 3. So look, z can equal 10/3, and I'm going to subtract 8/3. 10 minus 8 is 2, so I get 2/3 is one of my solutions. And z could also equal negative 10/3 minus 8/3. It gives me negative 18/3. That means z could be negative 6. So z is negative 6 and 2/3 is the solution, are the solutions to this. All right, solve 4x squared plus 20x minus 11 equals 0 by completing the square. First of all, this is in standard form. So what you're going to do is move the 11 to the other side. So now we got 4x squared plus 20x equals 11. And you have a coefficient, leading coefficient that's greater than 1, which is 4. So you're going to divide everything by 4. So we're left with x squared plus 5x equals 11/4. And the leading coefficient, the coefficient of the linear term is 5. So you take 5 and divide it by 2. And the second step is to square the result. So that's going to be 25/4. That's what you add to both sides of this equation to complete the square. So you get x squared plus 5x plus 25/4. And I'm going to add 25/4 to 11/4. I can write this as a square. So I have x plus 5/2 squared. And 25 plus 11 will be 36. 36/4. And what you're going to do is take the square root of both sides. So you got x plus 5 halves equals plus or minus, well, the square root of 36 is 6. And the square root of 4 is 2. And you're going to subtract 5 halves to both sides. So x could be 6 halves minus 5 halves. And x could also be negative 6 halves minus 5 halves. So what you get is x is, well, 6 minus 5 is 1, so 1 half is one of your solutions. And negative 6 minus 5 is negative 11, so negative 11 halves is your other solution. This completes the lesson for today.